I was sitting in my car outside Magnolia Cafe in Austin, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, trying to convince myself to go inside. It was January 15th, 2025, a cold Wednesday evening, and I was about to go on my first date in 3 years. My first date since Derek. My name is Sarah. I'm 37 years old. And this is the story of how a blind date I never wanted to go on became the beginning of the most beautiful love story I never thought I deserved. I almost drove away at least 5 times. The only thing keeping me in that parking spot was the thought of my best friend Maya's reaction if I bailed. She'd been trying to set me up with her husband's co-worker for months, and I'd finally agreed just to get her to stop asking. "Just one coffee," she'd said. "If you hate him, you never have to see him again." But Sarah, I really think you two would connect. Maya was the only person who knew the whole truth about why I'd been single for 3 years. She was the one who'd found me in the emergency room after Derek's final rage, the one who'd helped me pack my things while he was in jail, the one who'd held me while I cried through countless therapy sessions. If Maya thought I was ready to try dating again, maybe she was right. Or maybe I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror one more time. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a blue sweater that covered the faint scar on my left arm, jeans that weren't too tight or too loose, minimal makeup that didn't look like I was trying too hard. Everything about my appearance was designed to be unremarkable, forgettable, safe. Derek had controlled everything about how I looked when we were married. My hair, my clothes, my makeup. He had opinions about all of it, and those opinions came with consequences if I didn't follow them. Even 3 years later, getting dressed for anything felt like navigating a minefield of his criticism echoing in my head. I forced myself to get out of the car and walk toward the cafe. Maya had shown me a photo of James, tall, dark hair, kind eyes, genuine smile. He was a veterinarian, divorced with no kids, apparently as nervous about blind dates as I was. "He's nothing like Derek," Maya had promised. "He's gentle, Sarah, really gentle." The cafe was busy, but not crowded, filled with the usual Austin mix of students, young professionals, and people like me who were probably questioning their life choices. I spotted James immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, looking just as nervous as I felt, checking his phone and glancing toward the door every few seconds. When our eyes met, he smiled and stood up, and I felt a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just attraction, though he was definitely attractive, but curiosity, interest, the possibility that this might actually be pleasant instead of terrifying. "Sarah," he asked as I approached the table. "That's me," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You must be James. Guilty as charged." His smile was warm and reached his eyes, and when he extended his hand for a shake, his movements were slow and deliberate, not aggressive or demanding, just present. "Thank you for agreeing to this. I have to admit, I was pretty nervous about meeting Maya's mysterious friend." "Mysterious?" I laughed despite myself as we sat down. "What did she tell you about me?" "Just that you're incredibly smart, work in nonprofit management, love to read, and that I'd be an idiot not to want to meet you. Oh, and that you're beautiful, which..." He gestured vaguely in my direction, looking slightly embarrassed. She wasn't exaggerating. I felt my cheeks warm. It had been so long since someone had complimented me without an ulterior motive, without expecting something in return, without it feeling like a manipulation tactic. "Maya tends to oversell her friends. What did she tell you about yourself?" "That I'm a decent guy who works too much and needs to get out more." James flagged down the server. "She's not wrong. What can I get you to drink?" I ordered coffee, decaf, because my anxiety was already high enough, and watched James interact with the server. He was polite, patient, didn't show any signs of impatience when she took a moment to write down our order. Derek had always been rude to service workers, treating them like they were beneath him. It was one of the early red flags I'd ignored. "So, nonprofit management," James said once we were alone again. "That sounds rewarding, but probably exhausting." "Both," I agreed. "I work for an organization that provides services to domestic violence survivors. Crisis counseling, legal advocacy, emergency housing assistance. It's meaningful work." I watched his face carefully as I said it. In my experience, men reacted to my job in one of 3 ways. They got uncomfortable and changed the subject. They asked invasive questions about my clients, or they made jokes about crazy women and bitter divorces. James did none of those things. "That must be incredibly challenging," he said quietly. "I imagine you see people at their most vulnerable moments." "Yes," I said, surprised by his response, "but also at their strongest. It takes tremendous courage to leave an abusive situation. The women I work with are some of the bravest people I've ever met." "How did you get into that field?" The question I'd been dreading. I could lie. given the sanitized version about always wanting to help people. Or I could tell him the truth and probably end this date before it really started. Something about his genuine interest made me choose honesty. Personal experience, I said simply. I was married to someone who wasn't a good person. When I finally left him, the services I received literally saved my life. I wanted to help other women find their way to safety. James was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd shared. Then he leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but serious. I'm sorry you went through that, and I'm grateful you found your way out. No questions about what my ex had done to me. No demands for details. No suggestions that I might have provoked the abuse or stayed too long. Just acknowledgement of my pain and appreciation for my survival. I felt something tight in my chest start to loosen. Thank you, I said. It was a long time ago. 3 years isn't that long, he said quietly. I stared at him. How did you know it was 3 years? Maya might have mentioned that you've been single for a while. She's worried about you, you know. She thinks you're ready to start dating again, but she also said you're scared. I should have been angry that Maya had shared so much about my personal life. Instead, I felt oddly relieved that James already knew the basic outline of my story. It meant I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't. She's right on both counts, I admitted. I am scared. Terrified, actually. This is my first date since everything happened. Then I'm honored you chose to have it with me, James said. And for what it's worth, I'm scared too. Not for the same reasons, obviously, but dating at our age after being married, it's complicated. How long were you married? 8 years. Divorced about 2 years ago. No kids, which made the logistics easier but didn't make it hurt any less. He paused. My ex-wife decided she wanted a different life, with different dreams, with a different person. It was pretty devastating at the time. I'm sorry. That must have been awful. It was. But honestly, looking back, I think we both knew we weren't right for each other. We just didn't want to admit it. Sometimes people grow apart, and that's nobody's fault. He met my eyes. That's very different from what you went through. The distinction felt important. James wasn't lumping all relationship endings together, wasn't suggesting that my experience with abuse was just another form of incompatibility. He understood that what had happened to me was different, more serious, not something I'd chosen or contributed to. Our conversation flowed easily after that. James told me about his veterinary practice, the animals he treated, the joy and heartbreak of working with beloved pets and their families. I shared stories about my work, the programs we were developing, the challenges of securing funding for services that society often preferred to ignore. We discovered we both loved reading. He preferred science fiction and biographies. I gravitated toward literary fiction and true crime. We both enjoyed hiking, though neither of us had been out on the trails in months. We both had complicated relationships with our families, though for different reasons. My parents still don't understand why my marriage ended, James said. They keep asking when I'm going to work things out with Rebecca, like divorce is just a phase I'm going through. My parents pretend Derek never existed. I replied. They've never asked what happened, never acknowledged that I was married for 5 years, never mentioned that I once had a completely different life. It's like they think if we don't talk about it, it didn't really happen. Which approach is more frustrating? Honestly, yours. At least your parents acknowledge your pain, even if they don't understand it. Mine just erase it. We've been talking for 2 hours without either of us noticing. The cafe was starting to empty out, and I realized I hadn't checked my phone once, hadn't scanned the room for exits, hadn't felt the familiar knot of anxiety that usually accompanied any social interaction with men. I should probably head home, I said reluctantly. Early meeting tomorrow. Of course. James signaled for the check. Would you be interested in doing this again sometime? Maybe dinner next time. The old Sarah, the one who'd been married to Derek, would have said yes immediately, eager to please, afraid of disappointing him. The newer Sarah, the one who'd spent 3 years in therapy learning to trust her own instincts, paused to actually consider the question. Did I want to see James again? Yes. Did I feel safe with him? Surprisingly, yes. Was I ready for the complications that came with dating? That was harder to answer. I'd like that, I said finally. But I should probably warn you that I'm not. I don't move fast. Dating, relationships, any of it. I need to take things really slowly. That works for me, James said without hesitation. I'm not in any hurry either. We can go as slow as you need. He walked me to my car, maintaining a respectful distance, not trying to hug me or kiss me or touch me in any way. When we reached my Honda, he simply said, "I had a really wonderful time tonight, Sarah. Thank you for taking a chance on a blind date with a stranger. Thank you for being worth the risk," I replied. James called me 3 days later, just like he'd said he would. We made plans for dinner the following weekend, somewhere casual and public where I'd feel comfortable. When Saturday came, I found myself actually looking forward to seeing him instead of dreading the social obligation. Dinner was even better than coffee. James had chosen a small Italian restaurant in South Austin, warm and friendly without being too intimate. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, my interests, my goals for the future. He shared stories about his practice, his hobbies, his close relationship with his sister who lived in Houston. Most importantly, he didn't push. When I tensed up after he accidentally brushed my hand reaching for his water glass, he immediately moved his hands to his lap and continued the conversation without making me feel self-conscious about my reaction. When I declined his offer to walk me to my car because I wasn't ready for that level of physical proximity, he accepted it gracefully. "I'm enjoying getting to know you, Sarah," he said as we stood outside the restaurant. "Whatever pace feels right for you is the right pace for us." We started texting between dates, casual conversations about our days, funny stories from work, photos of books we were reading. James was consistent without being overwhelming, present without being demanding. He seemed to understand intuitively that I needed predictability, reliability, proof that he was who he claimed to be. Our third date was a Saturday afternoon at the Austin Central Library. We browsed the stacks together, recommending books to each other, talking about authors we loved and stories that had shaped us. It felt natural and comfortable, and for the first time in years, I found myself relaxing completely in a man's presence. "Can I ask you something?" James said as we sat in the library cafe, surrounded by other readers and families and the peaceful energy of people pursuing knowledge and stories. "Sure. Maya mentioned that you're in therapy. I hope it's not too personal, but I wanted you to know that I think that's really brave. I went to counseling after my divorce, and it helped me understand a lot about myself and what I wanted in a relationship." I appreciated that he brought it up directly instead of dancing around it. "I've been seeing Dr. Martinez for 3 years now. It's been essential. I don't think I'd be able to sit here with you today if I hadn't done the work to understand what happened to me and how to move forward." "What has that process been like, if you don't mind me asking?" I considered how much to share. With most people, I kept my therapeutic journey private, partly for their comfort and partly for my own protection. But James had been nothing but respectful and genuine, and something told me he could handle honesty. "Painful," I said, learning to trust my own instincts again after years of having them undermined. Understanding that the abuse wasn't my fault, even when I made choices that kept me in the situation longer than I should have stayed. Figuring out how to be alone without being lonely, how to be independent without being isolated. That sounds incredibly difficult. It was, but also liberating. I know who I am now in a way I never did before. I know what I will and won't accept in a relationship. I know my own worth. "What won't you accept?" The question was direct, but not intrusive. James genuinely wanted to understand my boundaries, probably so he could respect them. "Control," I said immediately. "Anyone who tries to tell me how to dress, who to spend time with, how to spend my money, where I can and can't go. Possessiveness disguised as love. Criticism that tears me down instead of building me up. Any form of physical intimidation or violence, obviously." James nodded. "What about what you do want?" I've been so focused on identifying red flags that I hadn't spent much time articulating what healthy love looked like. "Partnership," I said slowly. "Someone who sees me as an equal, who respects my opinions even when they disagree with them. Kindness, especially when things get difficult. Honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Someone who has their own life and interests but chooses to share them with me." "That sounds reasonable and healthy," James said. "And for what it's worth, that's exactly what I want too." We'd been dating for 2 months when James invited me to meet his sister. Elena was visiting from Houston for the weekend, and he thought we might enjoy each other's company. The idea of meeting his family felt significant, like a step toward something more serious, but also terrifying. "You don't have to if you're not ready," James assured me when he saw my hesitation. "Elena understands that I'm dating someone who's been through some difficult experiences. She's very gentle, and she won't ask invasive questions. I agreed, partly because I was curious about this sister he spoke of so fondly, and partly because meeting her felt like a test of my own progress. If I could handle a casual lunch with James's family member, maybe I really was healing. Elena turned out to be warm, funny, and refreshingly direct. She was a high school Spanish teacher, divorced with 2 teenage sons, and had the same kind eyes as her brother. Over brunch at a cafe near Zilker Park, she shared stories about James's childhood, his dedication to his work, and his kindness toward people and animals alike. He rescued a 3-legged dog last month, Elena told me. Couldn't find anyone to adopt him. So guess who has a new roommate? You adopted a 3-legged dog? I asked James, charmed by this detail. His name is Tripod, which I know is terrible, but he came with a name and he responds to it. James looked slightly embarrassed. He's a sweet old guy who just needed someone to give him a chance. Something about that story, a man who saw value in a damaged creature that others had overlooked, resonated deeply with me. Derek had always wanted everything in his life to be perfect, unmarked, impressive to outsiders. The idea of choosing to love something specifically because it needed love was foreign to everything I'd known about relationships. After lunch, Elena hugged me goodbye and whispered, "He's one of the good ones, you know, and he talks about you constantly." That evening, James and I went for a walk around Ladybird Lake. It was a beautiful March evening, warm enough for t-shirts, the sunset painting the water in shades of gold and pink. We'd been walking in comfortable silence for a while when James stopped and turned to face me. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." My heart immediately started racing. In my experience, "I need to tell you something" was the preface to bad news, to revelations that changed everything, to the moment when people showed you who they really were underneath their careful presentations. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm falling in love with you," James said quietly. "I know that might be scary to hear, and I'm not expecting you to say it back or feel pressured to respond in any particular way. I just wanted you to know where I stand, because honesty is important to me, and I think it's important to you too." I stared at him, processing his words. He wasn't demanding a response or threatening to leave if I didn't reciprocate. He wasn't using his feelings as leverage or manipulation. He was simply sharing his truth and leaving space for mine. "That is scary to hear," I admitted, "but not for the reasons you might think." "What reasons?" "Because I'm falling in love with you too, and that terrifies me. Not because of who you are, but because of what love has meant in my past. Because I'm afraid that if I let myself love you completely, I'll lose myself again." James reached for my hands, slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. When I didn't, he held them gently, his thumbs tracing soft circles on my knuckles. "Sarah, loving someone shouldn't mean losing yourself. It should mean becoming more yourself, not less. If I ever make you feel like you need to be smaller or different or less than who you are, I want you to tell me immediately. What if I'm too damaged?" I whispered. "What if my past makes it impossible for me to be a good partner?" "You're not damaged," James said firmly. "You're a survivor. You're strong and compassionate and incredibly brave. Your past doesn't define your future unless you let it." We stood there by the lake, holding hands and looking at each other, and I felt something shift inside me. Not just love for James, though that was definitely there, but love for myself. Pride in how far I'd come, appreciation for the woman I'd become, hope for the life I was building. "I love you too," I said finally. "I'm scared, but I love you." James smiled, the kind of smile that started in his eyes and spread across his entire face. "We can be scared together," he said. "There's no rush, no timeline, no pressure. We'll figure out as we go." 6 months later, James asked me to move in with him. By then, I met his parents, his closest friends, several of his colleagues. I'd seen him stressed at work, frustrated with difficult cases, sad about animals he couldn't save. I'd seen him in all kinds of moods and situations, and he'd remained consistently kind, patient, and respectful. More importantly, I'd learned to trust my own judgment again. When James was late for a date because of an emergency at the clinic, I didn't assume he was lying or testing me. When he disagreed with my opinion about a movie or a political issue, I didn't feel attacked or criticized. When he was tired and less talkative than usual, I didn't blame myself or assume I'd done something wrong. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that these were signs of my own healing as much as evidence of James's character. I was learning to exist in a relationship without losing myself, to maintain my independence while building intimacy, to trust without becoming dependent. Moving in together was a bigger step than either of us had anticipated. I've been living alone for 3 years and had grown protective of my space, my routines, my sense of control over my environment. James understood this and suggested we take it slowly, maybe starting with a few nights a week and building from there. "This is your home too," he told me as I unpacked my books in his living room. "I want you to feel completely comfortable here. If anything doesn't work for you, we'll change it." We had to navigate practical challenges: whose furniture to keep, how to merge our different styles, how to share space without getting in each other's way. But we also had to navigate deeper issues around autonomy, trust, and vulnerability. The first time James came home to find me crying after a particularly difficult day at work, he asked what he could do to help instead of trying to fix my problems or minimize my feelings. When I had nightmares about Derek and woke up disoriented and frightened, James gave me space to calm down before offering comfort, never taking my trauma responses personally. "I love all of you," he told me one night after I'd apologized for being too much work. "Your strength and your vulnerability, your confidence and your fears, your past and your future. You're not a project for me to fix, Sarah. You're a person I choose to love every day." We got engaged on the anniversary of our first date, exactly 1 year after that terrifying coffee meeting that changed both our lives. James proposed at the same corner table in Magnolia Cafe where we'd first met, with a simple ring and a speech about how he wanted to spend the rest of his life proving that love could be safe, steady, and growth-oriented. I said yes through happy tears, surrounded by the same energy of possibility and new beginnings that had characterized our entire relationship. Our wedding was small and intimate: immediate family, closest friends, and a ceremony focused on the promises we were making to each other rather than the party or the performance. Maya was my maid of honor, crying harder than I was as James and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. "I promise to love you without trying to change you," I said, "to support your dreams while pursuing my own, to choose honesty over comfort, growth over stagnation, partnership over possession. I promise to trust you with my heart while never giving up my own identity. I promise to be worthy of your trust every single day," James replied, "to create a safe space where you can be completely yourself, to love you not despite your past, but because of the incredible woman it helped you become. I promise to build a life with you that honors both our independence and our commitment to each other." 2 years into our marriage, we're still figuring things out, still growing individually and together. We both continue in therapy, individually and occasionally as a couple, because we've learned that healthy relationships require ongoing work and intentional communication. I still have difficult days, moments when Derek's voice echoes in my head or when I struggle with trusting my own perceptions. But now I have a partner who understands that healing isn't linear, that trauma responses don't reflect my feelings about him, that supporting me means giving me space to process rather than trying to rescue me from my own emotions. James still struggles with the aftermath of his first marriage, with trust issues of his own, with the fear that people he loves will decide he's not enough and leave. But we've learned to be patient with each other's wounds while not letting them define our relationship. We've talked about having children, maybe through adoption since my work has shown me how many kids need loving homes. We've talked about buying a house together, traveling to places we've both always wanted to see, building a life that reflects our values and dreams. Most of all, we've proven to ourselves and each other that love doesn't have to hurt, that healthy relationships are possible even after devastating ones, that healing and growth can happen simultaneously with building something new and beautiful. People sometimes ask me if I'm grateful for what Derek put me through, if I think the abuse was somehow necessary for me to appreciate James. The answer is absolutely not. I would never wish my experience on anyone, and I don't believe trauma is required for growth or that suffering makes love more meaningful. But I am grateful for my own strength, for the way I survived and rebuilt my life. I'm grateful for the work I've done to heal and the wisdom I've gained about my own worth. I'm grateful for Maya's persistence in setting us up, for James's patience with my fears, for the therapy that helped me understand the difference between love and control. Mostly, I'm grateful that I didn't let Derek's definition of love become my only understanding of what relationships could be. That I stayed open to the possibility that someone could love me without trying to diminish me. That partnership could mean addition rather than subtraction. That I could be completely myself while also being part of something bigger. The blind date I almost skipped became the beginning of the rest of my life. Not because James rescued me. I'd already done the work of rescuing myself. But because he offered me the chance to experience love as a source of strength rather than a threat to my identity. We're living proof that it's possible to build something beautiful from broken pieces. That the right person will love your scars along with your strengths. That happily ever after doesn't require forgetting your past or pretending it didn't shape you. Some fairy tales start with once upon a time. Ours started with I'm too scared to go on this date. And maybe that's the most honest beginning for any real love story. Acknowledging the fear while choosing hope anyway. Being brave enough to try again even when your heart has been broken. Trusting that somewhere out there is someone worth the risk of loving again.